Hello and welcome back. In this video, I should get in a better habit of welcome back to the complete web dev series where in this chapter what we're doing is we're building a procedural PHP login registration system. And specifically in this video, what we're going to do is we are going to basically we're going to do most of the form validation to check things like, hey, required fields. We're going to check if the confirm and the password match. We're going to check if it's a valid email. All of that in this video. And then in the next video, we're going to do one last piece of form validation, but we're also going to write our database connection function so that we can check in the database to see if there's already a user with that email address. So in the next two videos, we will be finishing up both our ability to use the database within our application and our form validation. So let's jump right in. Let me switch over to my screen here. All right, so just go ahead and make sure your server is up and running. That will be sudo, one second. That will be sudo opt lamp examp start. In my case, mine should already be up and running, and it is. Just make sure yours are up and running. And then what we're going to do is continue on with our login register.php. Now I know it seems like we're on this register page for a long time, and we are, but the other pages will go much quicker because we're having to build out all of the functionality, and we're just using this page to do that. So our database connections and all of that are happening, just building this page out. So I still have a var dump up here from the last video, just showing the cleaned and sanitized form fields that come back after we post. One thing that let's just go ahead and get started actually. Right here inside this if post, I'm going to get rid of this dump and die right there. And I'm going to go ahead and leave our post variable that we had set up with our return from our clean post. The next thing that we want to do here is let's just start off with some simple validation. And what we want to do is just check that, let me save this. Let's just check that all of our fields are going to be, all of our fields here are going to be required. And so we can just loop through and see if that is empty, and then we can say that it's required, okay? So, what I'd like to do, instead of just doing each field separately, let's just define an array that has each field in it and then loop through that array, because we're going to be basically doing the same thing for each one of these. We're going to say, hey, is the first name's required? Did they send anything back in the post with that? The last name's required, the email is required, and then we can build out our errors array based upon that. So let's go ahead and do that now. What I'd like to do is just put a comment here, and we're going to say check for required fields. Okay. And we can go ahead and give that a little space there. So we're going to check for required fields, and like I said, we're going to create an array. So start off by creating a variable, and we'll just call this required. And we'll set that equal to an array. And then inside of this array, I'm going to go ahead and do this on separate lines just so it's easy to read. We'll do first underscore name as the key. Now what we're going to do is we want to return a response, like a user-friendly message to read that says first name is required. So what I'm going to do is just define what I want it to be called right here. So the key will be the field name, and this will be the name, the user-friendly name will be the value of this field. And so we're going to do this for each one of our fields. And what we need to do is make sure that the keys here match our IDs and names of the actual input. So right here, see how the name is first name? I need to make sure that key matches that exactly. So we'll do the same thing for last name. And we'll continue on. We got a couple of these here. I think we had 5 fields. And just make sure that your key for this is matching the name of the actual field. So this one will be password. You know what, and I did have a few people request that I make my font size a little bit bigger. So we'll go ahead and do that. Hopefully it's a little bit easier to read. And then we'll go ahead and also do the confirm right here. So the name was just confirm. Okay, and I have a nice mix of single and double quotes there. You can make those all the same if you want. It won't matter in this situation. So now that we have this array though, this won't do anything on its own. So let's go ahead and loop through these arrays here. And so to do that, we're going to do a for each. So we'll say for each. Now what do we want to for each? Well, we want to for each of our required fields. So we created an array to store those required fields called required. And then we're going to say as, and then we get to actually make aliases basically for these keys and value pairs of this array here, this associative array. So for the key, I want to call that field because that's actually the field name. So that's right here. So I'm just going to call that field, and for the value of those, I'm just going to call that display. We'll set that to a variable called display inside this loop. So display is going to be this part, and the field will be this. So this is the key, this is the key, this is the value. So that's how you do the for each loop, and we'll set the keys equal in each iteration of this loop. The key will be set equal to this field, and this value of this index or this associative array will be this display variable right there. So now all we need to do is check. Let's see. We do have our errors array up here. Just make sure you do have that because we're going to use that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to do an if statement here. We're going to say, hey, if empty, and then we're going to check in our post. So here, when we set up this post array, we're going to check inside of that array and check to see if our field, so we use the array syntax here, and we're checking if our field is set in there. Okay. If that's empty, meaning it's empty. Okay. The other thing we probably need to do is, so that this doesn't error out. Well, you know what? This is fine for now. So let's just leave this. I don't want to get too carried away. So we're checking if it's empty. Now, empty is a built-in PHP function. We didn't write that, and all that's going to do is check to see if this is an empty value or not. Okay. Then if it is empty, what we're going to do here is we're going to add something to our errors array. So we had an array up here, so we can either push, we can use the array push to add something to the end, or we can use this syntax here where we just say errors, and then we tell it that it's an array, and we're going to add a new element to this array, and we're going to say equals, and then we're going to do a string literal here, so we have to use the double quotes, and then we'll use curly brackets inside the double quotes, and we're going to type display. So now we're going to use our display right here, this value here, it's going to be put in here, so we're going to say display, and then we'll just put is required. Okay, and then we'll put a semicolon there, and then if you notice in the top of our page, once it goes through this, we're using that errors array, gets put into our display errors function that we created in an earlier video, and so any sort of required field should show up now as an error. So let's go back and check that, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit submit here without putting anything into our fields. Okay, so now you can see that we have our display errors is showing one row here, one error for each one of these. So if I would type something into this first name and hit register, Now it only says that the last name, email, password, and confirm password are required. And that's because I had something in these. Now, if I do something in all of these, you can see that we don't get any display errors because all of them had a value in there. Now, one thing that's annoying, and I think we should go ahead and fix it now, is when I hit submit, since we're doing form validation, the fields reset. And so the person can't see what they typed in there before, or they have to retype it. So say they forget to fill in their email or it's not a valid email, then they would have to put in their first name and last name again, even though the other fields might have passed validation. So let's go ahead and fix that to where they don't have to keep doing that. That's going to be a pretty simple fix, although it might take a second. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and open up your functions.php, and we're actually going to create a function here to help us with this. And what I'd like to do is create a function called isSetElse. Okay, isSetElse. And it's going to take a few parameters. The first parameter is going to be the array. The next parameter will be the key. And the next parameter will be one called default. And we're going to give that a default value of a empty string. Okay, so this will take 3 parameters, although the third parameter will be an optional parameter because we are giving it a default value. So if we don't pass this third parameter into our function, what's going to happen is it's going to just use this default that we assigned. So I don't think we've talked about default parameters yet. They're really cool. So we can pass 3 into our isSetElse function. But what we want to be able to do is basically, let me just show you this. I went back to the register.php, and inside of our first name here, let's go ahead and give this a value. And we're going to give this value, we're going to make that equal to, we have to use our PHP function in here. So right now we're just in HTML, we're not inside PHP. So what we're going to have to do here is put in some PHP tags, and then we're going to do this equal sign, which is, this syntax is shorthand for opening PHP tags echo. Okay, that's what that means. And what we want to echo in the value of this is our isSetElse function that we just created. So isSetElse, and then we'll go ahead and close that. And you could do a semicolon right here if you want. You don't have to on this single inline shorthand echo PHP thing. But what we're going to do here is we're going to say, hey, I want to check the post. The post is the array that we're going to check. And the key of that array will match this name right here. So this will be first name. Okay. So if it is set in that post, go ahead and use it as the value of this. Else, it's just going to use an empty string. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole value statement here, including the little extra space at the beginning. And let's put that into all of our inputs here. So right here in my last name, I'll put it there, but we just need to change first name in this instance to last name. We'll do the same thing for email. And I know this function doesn't make much sense yet because we haven't actually written the contents of our function, but I'm just setting it up in our HTML so that it will work once we're done writing the function. And it doesn't take very long. We're almost done now. So again, what we're doing is we're just echoing out for the value our isSetElse. So whatever our isSetElse function returns, it's going to put it inside of this value attribute in our input. Just like that. So that's all the changes that we need to make for our HTML to work to refill these values. But inside of our functions.php, we need to return something here. And so what we need to return is whatever the value is inside of this array with this key. So we'll start off with our return. So let's type in return array, and then we'll use our square brackets here, and then we're going to pass in the key. Okay, that's it. This will work, but this won't handle our default. So what this will do is return our array key, but but we have this else here that we set up, and what we want to be able to do is, if this is empty, go ahead and return the default. So above this return, we're going to kind of set up a guard clause here, and we're going to say if not is set. Now, this is set function is built into PHP, and it allows us to check if an array has the key of this. Okay, that's one way to do it. There's other ways, and this not right here it negates it. So it's basically, hey, I want to make sure that if this is not set, then we're going to do something. Okay, so what we need to check here is, oops, we need what happened? There we go. All right. So if not is set, array key. If that's not set, or we could say if it is empty, array key. Then what? Then we're going to open and close our curly braces, and then what we want to do is just return our default like this. So now when we first load the page back in our register.php, when we first load our page, there's going to be no post. And in fact, we're going to get an error here because post won't exist at all when we first load the page. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go ahead and set up this array at the top of the page here outside of this if statement, because what's going to happen is the first time that this page runs, it's not going to hit anything inside this if statement because there hasn't been any sort of form submission. And so when it gets down here to try to use this post, this would not have been set yet because it was only set inside of this if statement. So that should be it now. So I'll go back now and I'm just going to hit enter, go back to the same page. We don't have any errors. But let's go ahead now and I'm going to type my first name in here, but I'm not going to, well, I'll put my last name as well, but I'm not going to put an email password, confirm password. And so we should get a form validation error that complains about these three being empty. So let's go ahead and hit refresh. And now you can see that it does give us those messages, but our first and last name now have the original values put in them, and that's because that they were set inside of the post. And so we were able, with our isSetElse function, it just echoed that back into the value of those inputs. These didn't have anything, so they were empty, and then we also got our error messages. Okay, so now this is working a lot more how I want it to work. We are checking for required fields, and we are keeping the values that they previously had posted there. So let's go ahead and continue on now with our form validation. The next thing that I want to do is check if the password and the confirm password matches. So if they type two different passwords here, we want to tell them that. So let's go ahead and do that next. So underneath this for each statement here, we're going to go ahead and check passwords match. And the one thing is we don't really need to do this if our required fields have already returned some sort of arrays. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if empty errors. Then we're going to check these passwords because we don't really need to. We could do all of the checks, but if they failed in this part, then there's really no reason to check this. So if they didn't even fill the password and confirm password out, we don't need to we don't need to do the logic here. So we'll put it in an if statement. And so what we're going to do here is this is going to be pretty easy. So basically it's going to be if post password, if that does not equal post confirm, then we are going to add to our errors array. Remember, by using this syntax here, and what we'll do here is we'll just say passwords do not match. Put our semicolon, And that's it. That's all we need to do to check if our passwords match. So let's go ahead and check that now in our browser. And I'm going to type in password here, and I'm going to type in something that doesn't match there. And I'm going to hit register. And well, okay, so it didn't make it there because go ahead and put some values in here and hit register. Now that it passed through our checks to make sure everything's required, it got to our passwords check, and now these two didn't match, so it says passwords do not match. So let's go ahead and check. I'm going to make those match by typing in the same values here and hit register, and now you can see that it did pass. We don't have any errors. The next thing that we need to check for our form validation is, and I think, yeah, this is going to be our last check here for this video. We just want to make sure that the email is a valid email. So PHP actually gives us a really cool way of doing that, so we don't have to do any kind of crazy logic there. But right here under this, let's do a check valid email. Okay. And again, we don't need to do this if they've already failed some stuff. So we'll say if empty errors, and we're going to say if, now PHP gives us a way to do this called filter var. Okay, so if filter var, and then the first parameter inside this is going to be post email, because we're going to pass the email into it, and then the second is going to be a constant that they expect for the filter var function, and in our case this is going to be filter underscore validate email. Now this is not inside quotes because this is actually a constant built into PHP. Okay, so, and right now this filter var, it returns true or false, so it returns a boolean. So if it is a valid email, this will evaluate to true. So what we need to do is we want to know if it doesn't evaluate to true. So we'll put an exclamation point there, and that will say, hey, if this does not equal a valid email. So we'll go ahead and open and close our curly brackets here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add to our errors. Oops, let me turn off my caps lock. We're going to add to our errors array, and we're going to say you must provide a valid email, semicolon. Okay, so this will validate our email that it is a valid email. Now we don't know if this is a working email. We'll do something later where we send them an email and make them confirm that. But for now, we just want to know that that it could be a valid email based upon the text string that they've given us. So let's go ahead now and try this again. Now this should pass validation, but we just have ASDF in the email. So I'm going to hit register again. And now you can see that you must provide a valid email. So let's go ahead and put something in here like example at mail.com. Now the way that this is structured, this could be a valid email, so this should pass, and it does. So as long as this is set up like a valid email address, that filter var function will go ahead and pass that. Now if you want to read more about that, you can go to php.net, and this is a great resource. And if you type in filter var and search here, it brings you to the filter var page, and now you can see this filter right here is what we used, and this says that the types of filters manual page, so they have a separate page listing those. So we have validate filters, sanitize filters, other filters, and filter flags. So let's go ahead and go to the validate ones, and so they have bool, boolean, domain, email, which is the one we used right here, and then they have float, int, IP, MAC address, regular expression, URL. So they have quite a few that's built in that we can use with that filter var function. So if you need to do other validations in your projects, check that out, because they may have some really cool stuff here They have some different sanitized functions that you can use. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Um, let's see. I think we're done with this part of it. The one thing that we want to do is check our database to make sure no one has registered with that email address before. But in order to do that, we need to be able to connect to our database and run some of our SQL queries that we learned in the last chapter. So in the next video, what we're going to do is set up our database connection. We're actually going to create a function to do that. And then inside of our code, we can use that same function to connect to our database and go ahead and use the SQL statement. And we're also going to talk a little bit more about security and how people could screw us over if we're not careful, and how we can avoid some more issues. All right, so I will see you in the next video. I hope you guys are enjoying this. If you are, please comment, like, subscribe. Tell me if you had any big aha moments so far, and we will continue on. Thanks, guys. I'm proud of you.